and it has been, you can see here from the results of the DRAISE test, but it's just what I've shown you before in terms of a statistical point of view. But what is very interesting, at least to me, is that when you stop the use of BAK, there is still something going on in the surface of the eye. Let's look at these results here. This is the infiltration of CD45 cells, which means inflammatory cells, into the conjunctiva. So when we look at what happens after we stop the use after 1 day, when we stop the use after 4 hours, what happens after 1 day? If we use BAK, there are still CD45 cells into the conjunctiva, but when we look at the PBS or polyquad, there are no more these cells into the conjunctiva. And trust me, it's really important, because it means that even if we do not see hyperemia when we use BAK, there is still something going on into the conjunctiva. And this is what I showed to you before with that technique which allows us today to really measure the degree of inflammation on the surface of the eye. We don't see a hyperemia, but there is still something going on in the eyes of our patients. And it means symptoms. And it means also some other clinical signs which can really influence the quality of life of our patients and, of course, the quality of the ocular surface. So what about clinical study? Here, in a study published last year, they compared the travoprost, the combination of travoprost and the timolol, combination with BAK, and without BAK. Again, the idea was, is a BAK effective to lower IOP or not? This is the design of the study. It was a 6 weeks follow-up, and they considered the equivalence margin of 1.5 millimeters. And these were, you can see here, where there were almost 400 patients enrolled into the study. They were randomized and so on. There was a randomization, and the control, the follow-up was at 2 and after 6 weeks. And again, they measured the IOP 3 times during the day. And you see the results here. So when you use the combination of travoprost and the timolol with or without BAK, there is really no difference in terms of results. You can see from this picture here, and you can see also from these other results. So again, even if you have the combination of travoprost with the timolol and you use a polyquad, the clinical results in terms of reducing IOP are exactly the same than using BAK. Last but not least, there was this other study comparing the use of travoprost and the timolol, the combination, and comparing the results with the patients using bimatoprost and timolol. And this was a crossover study. More than 100 patients enrolled in this study, and they use a Gunfort for 4 weeks, and then the crossover, so they switched, and then they switched to the duotrav treatment. It was baseline visit, of course, and a visit after 4 weeks, and a visit after 8 weeks. So what about the endpoints? The endpoint was, of course, the mean change in IOP, and then also we want also to see if there was a change in the side effects after the switch. And also, last but not least, it was important also to see the preferences of patients and investigators comparing the 2 treatments. So the primary endpoint, the difference in terms of IOP, as you can see from the picture here, when you use the combination, when you use a duotrav with a polyquad, you have a significant reduction in terms of IOP compared to Gunfort. The secondary endpoint, you see that almost 70% of patients reach a target IOP less than 18 millimeters after 8 weeks of duotrav treatment. And there's also, what about the symptoms? You see stinging and burning were deemed to be less severe after treatment with the combination, which means with the duotrav. So from switching from Gamfort to duotrav, it was considered by patients as a positive result in terms of side effects. And also was each of the other symptoms was judged to be similar between therapies. But from a personal point of view, I think that the idea that the patients had better results is very important. But not also from their point of view, but also from our point of view. As you can see from the results here, also the investigators really preferred to prescribe duotrav instead of Gamfort, because it gives us important IOP decrease, but also it does not give any side effects. And you see the conclusion. So duotrav provides additional IOP decrease quite significantly compared to Gamfort, and also the target of IOP was reached in almost 70% of the patients. After the switch, it was less stinging and burning in a significant way. And as I mentioned to you, both the patients and investigators preferred to prescribe duotrav instead of Gamfort. And this is a study, a peer-reviewed study published in Eye last year. So in conclusion, I think that we have always to think about the ocular surface. As I mentioned to you, it's a functional unit. We have to consider all of the different parts which determine the ocular surface system. Again, the lid margin. We have to consider the tear film. We have to consider the ocular surface damage. We have also to consider inflammations, which is very, very important. So if we think about ocular surface, then probably we treat our patients with a dry eye in a different way, because a dry eye is not only an alteration of tears, but a dry eye is an alteration of the ocular surface. So we have to target all of these key factors playing a role in ocular surface disease. But what about our glaucoma patients? So we have to consider them as patients with ocular surface, possible ocular surface disease. The answer is yes. And here the solution is we should not use BAK. So I strongly recommend do not use BAK to preserve the surface of the eye. And luckily, and finally, we have 2 new products which are BAK free. They contain a polyquad, but the polyquad is a preservative which does not induce any damage on the surface of the eye. And again, we should treat carefully our patients with glaucoma, because otherwise they can have problems on the ocular surface. Thank you for your attention.